All right. On today's show, one of us is going to pick BC to defeat Louisville. The other one's not. You're going to have to wait and guess which of the hosts are going to pick them. All this and more on today's Locked On BC.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On BC, AJ Black. I am joined as always on Friday with Mitch Wolf. Mitch, how's it going?
Doing good. Excited that BC's back home this week. This is I think at this point in the season one of the few games where they have a good shot at winning the game. So I think this should be and it's not a night game, which is kind of a nice change of pace. So it should be a good game for BC, I think.
I have to say I'm looking forward to not having to stay up till 1 a.m. doing work. So thank you for a noon game, and we only get one of those, and then it's back to a night game again. But this is a game. Louisville is a 14.5 point favorite at this point when I was looking up the current odds on BetOnline. And, I think the overwhelming feel amongst writers, fans, opposing fan base is that Louisville should run away with this game. Mitch, I'm going to put you on the spot here because you tell me that you don't agree with this. Why?
No, so I think Louisville is kind of a chaotic team at this point. They've had some weird games thus far in the season. The first week they get kind of dog walked by Syracuse. Although I rewatched that game and it was 17-7 in the fourth quarter. So they really had a shot, and then they just kind of collapsed with some bad turnovers that put Syracuse in good field position to kind of just open up the game. So I think that game was closer than it appears, but, they still made those mistakes. UCF, they were at UCF. That's always a tough game, but they, only squeaked that out by 6 points. They lose a tough one to Florida State at home. Even though Florida State lost their quarterback, they still played quite well. And then they beat up on USF, who's one of the worst teams in college football. So, we kind of know what BC is at this point, I think, but Louisville is still a bit of a mystery. And, if you look at at least their offense, they're not performing up to they're scoring a decent amount of points, but they're not really consistent. Like, they've got a good running game, they've got a really deep backfield, but Malik Cunningham, stop me when you've heard this before, but he still hasn't developed as a pocket passer. He's thrown 3 interceptions, he's only thrown 2 touchdowns, he's only completing 60.7% of his passes. He's very inaccurate deep down the field. I was actually looking up some stats for my 3 keys to victory today. And if you look at passes that are 10 yards or more downfield, he's only completing 38.5% of those passes. And most of them are right down the middle. So he's very bad throwing to the outside as well. So, this offense they're trying to make things simple for him, but when he has to make the big plays as a passer, he's not consistently making them.
All right. Go ahead. Go ahead. Continue. I was cutting you off.
So Louisville's defense is, again, in some games they've allowed a good amount of points. Some games they haven't. They're an interesting defense. They run a 3-3-5 and they have lighter personnel, and they try to create a lot of havoc with very complex, exotic blitz looks, which is something BC has obviously struggled with. But I think that, I still don't think that defense has a ton of, game-breaking talent. I think Yasir Abdul is a good player. Keitrell Clark and Jarvis Brownlee are decent corners. But I'm not terrified of this defense, like I was more, even though Florida State ended up missing some of their best players. But, I think BC has a decent shot, and also because of Louisville's penchant for just, shooting themselves in the foot. They have one of the worst turnover margins in FBS. Let me see. I have it pulled up somewhere. They have a -3 turnover margin, which I think is it's in the lower half of teams. Malik Cunningham's, like I said, thrown 3 interceptions. He has 7 turnover-worthy plays. And they have the second highest number of lost fumbles in the FBS at 6. They're also ranked 116th in average penalty yards per game with 72. And they're tied with UMass at 124th in terms of average penalties per game at 8.75. So this team just makes a lot of mistakes. They're going on the road to play BC. So, I think they're going to end up shooting themselves in the foot a lot.
All right, so let me break down some of the things you said because I want to get some clarification on some of your points. So Cunningham, obviously he's a one-dimensional quarterback. Well, I don't want to call him one-dimensional, but he basically has not shown that he can pass. And if Louisville just goes to the run game and tries to just, get him out of the pocket and run around, don't you fear that he's going to do to BC's defense what Jordan Travis did last week?
Well, so I fear more of what Cunningham did to BC last year than what Travis did, because Travis never had a designed run because of his injury. He only had one or two scrambles, and one of them was really broke BC. But so that's a little bit different. But compare it to last year, where he had, I think, 130 yards and 3 touchdowns and killed BC on scrambles and on designed runs. So that was all bad. I think BC is going to be improved there, because I think that they have, their linebackers this year, the ones they're playing, you've got Cam Arnold, Bryce Steele, and Jalen Blackwell, especially on passing downs. And I think those 3 guys are a lot more athletic than the guys they were putting out there last year, and Isaiah Graham Mobley and Vinny DePalma, who's still on the team and, has a good role, but I don't think they'll ask him to be the guy spying Cunningham. I also think that they're going to, be a little more disciplined about, I don't think they're going to blitz him very much, or at least I wouldn't, because that kind of opens up seams where he can get out of the pocket and create. I think they're just going to kind of keep it a base rush, drop a lot of guys in coverage, and essentially say, hey, listen, we're going to do everything we can to keep you inside the pocket and make sure you beat us as a thrower. If you're going to beat us, if you're going to beat us throwing, then, we'll take that, because we don't think you can do that consistently.
Okay. And it doesn't seem like he has much around him. Like the other than Marshawn Ford, who's a pretty solid tight end, it doesn't feel like Louisville really has the dynamic weapons, even like Florida State had. As we saw, Florida State had some really nice weapons with them. It seems like Louisville is basically a one-man show.
Yeah, I mean, Tyler Hudson is their leading receiver in terms of, everything except touchdowns. They've only thrown 2 touchdowns, one to Trevion Cooley, who's a backup running back, and one to Jalen Carter, who is a wide receiver, and he only has 2 targets on the year. So Tyler Hudson's their number 1 guy. So I would expect, let me see, he's mostly an out wide receiver. So I would imagine they'll have Elijah Jones on him, or Josh DeBerry if it's a bigger personnel set. Amari Huggins Bruce is a speed guy that they can get the ball after the catch. He's more of a slot receiver, as is Braden Smith. But yeah, none of these guys are big guys. Even Marshawn Ford, 14 targets, 10 catches, 92 yards. Ford is good for this offense, but he's not he's not a dynamic downfield threat as of a tight end. He's more of kind of like a fullback, if anything. So I'm not super worried about that. Those 4 names, Hudson, Huggins, Bruce, Braden Smith, and Marshawn Ford, they're the only receivers who have more than 8 targets on this team. And there's only 6 receivers who have more than 6 targets. Everybody else has, 3 or fewer. So, this passing offense just isn't very efficient, I would say. It's a lot of underneath throws, dink and dunk. Hopefully they can get stuff after the catch. So, BC is going to have to tackle better, which, has been an issue against Virginia Tech and Florida State. I think that because these receivers are smaller, they're not as physically imposing. BC will be better equipped to make those tackles. And also, Jeff Hafley mentioned using live tackling more in practice this week after the struggles they had. So I think you'll see the tackling improve. But yeah, honestly, the run game is what scares me. So far this season, BC has struggled against teams that really utilize gap style runs, especially ones with multiple pullers. Like if you think about the Keshawn King touchdown against Virginia Tech, that was a buck sweep play where they pulled 2 guys, changed the math of the defensive front. A lot of Florida State's big chunk runs were very similar to that, GG counter, where they had 2 or 3 guys pulling across the formation to change the math and give them an advantage. Louisville is not that. They are a zone style running attack. Everything is outside or wide zone, and then they build the play action off that. So, that was something BC had some issues with last year, but if they stayed, they're getting in the backfield a lot more on the defensive line, which is good. That can help blow up those plays. And if they can stay disciplined and, maintain their gaps and, get some tackles for loss, I think they'll be able to stifle this running game. But Tyon Evans, their main running back, was a transfer from Tennessee. Really good player. He was a star at Tennessee last year and then transferred for kind of unknown reasons. But he's put the ball on the ground a decent bit with fumbles, but he's a speedster and he's a big dude. So, I think he's a bigger threat than Cunningham is.
All right. In a moment, I want to talk more about what BC needs to do to win this game and get Mitch's perspective on that. But this episode is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, the easiest place to spice up college football this season. Now, Underdog is available in over 30 states. You can go over and pick different games. In Massachusetts, you could go and pick, but you can't pick BC. But there's all sorts of other games you could pick. And all you do, you pick a couple different players. You pick the over and under on a specific stat, like something like Drake May from UNC with over 255 yards. If you get it right and you get your other picks right, you win money. You can win up to $10 on any pick. It's so easy, so fun to use. And it's one of the easiest fantasy games to play out there, and you can win cold hard cash in a single game. Now, when you sign up with the promo code Locked On, all one word, an Underdog is going to double your bonus up to $100 for your first first deposit. Excuse me. Again, $100. You get $100 free. That's a win right there. All you have to do is go to underdogfantasy.com or find the Underdog Fantasy app in the App Store or / Google Play Store. Again, that's Underdog Fantasy, promo code Locked On. Get in on the college football pick'em action today. All right, Locked On BC, AJ Black here, and we're talking the Louisville game. We just talked a lot about Malik Cunningham and kind of what he does and what that Louisville offense does or doesn't do. Now, Jeff Hafley this week talked specifically about the pressure of Louisville. And I wanted to get your perspective on this, Mitch. He said, and I believe if I believe I have the quote right, that they don't need to blitz a ton. They do blitz a ton, but they can get pressure with their front four. And they're talented enough with Yaya Diaby and Ashton Gallote. I think I got his name
Galati.
The guy from Louisville yesterday told me I screwed it up too. Yep. So eventually I'll get it right. Tell me about this defense and why. I want to hear why you think the offensive line that has struggled so much is going to be able to stop this Louisville defense.
So I'll preface this with saying that I'm not sure they're going to be able to fully stop them. Obviously, this is a good team. Yaya Diaby, obviously good player. Ashton Galati, good player. Yasir Abdullah, not your traditional kind of edge rusher, but he is a very dynamic player, can do a lot of different things. The reason why they're so successful is because they are able to just scheme up a lot of exotic blitz looks. So they might only bring 4 guys, but they're going to have 6 or 7 guys in the box on line of scrimmage and just loop them all around and really confuse BC. They did this a lot last year, and they confused a veteran offensive line with this kind of scheme. So you just got, and that's the problem. Like, this is something BC has struggled with throughout the entire season, even on less complex looks than what Louisville traditionally brings. So they're really going to need to be on their P's and Q's. I'm not sure how much rotation they're going to have on the line in this game because I think as players play more snaps, they'll be able to, find some tells and be like, okay, like we need to work together and like develop chemistry here to figure out what the opponent is doing. So I'm not sure that they're fully going to stop it because I think Louisville's obviously going to have some success. I know that the Louisville guy, I forget his name, but he mentioned that stat from David Hale about Louisville's ability to get pressure.
Matt McGannick.
Yes, Matt. And, that's something I talked about with BC. They do this quite well as well with their sim pressures, showing blitz, but then only bringing 4 guys from kind of unorthodox places to confuse the offensive line. But the way I think BC stops this is actually, I think if I'm going to mention this in my Keys to Victory article, but if there was ever a game for BC to run the ball and, establish the run, this is the game because Louisville is not very good at stopping the run. They allow 163 rushing yards a game, which is 94th in the country. They rank 100th in expected points added per rush at 0.137. And so like I said, they run a 3-3-5 defense, which means they're undersized. Their defensive ends, Diaby and Galati are, they're essentially, your normal 4-3 defensive ends, but they're playing in a different style. Their nose tackle's undersized. They only have 2 defensive linemen who are over 300 pounds. And I think they're both freshmen. Neither of them play that much. And their linebackers and front players are very undersized as well. So I think if this was the game for BC to like use 12, 13 personnel, get Hans Lillis and Spencer Witter out there as blocking tight ends, maybe even, sub one of them out and put in a extra offensive lineman as a blocking tight end. I think they could do that because I think BC can have success running the ball against this team. That will help slow down the pass rush and it'll help open up the play action passing game. I know I've said that BC needs to in general needs to pass to open up the run this season. But again, if they ever wanted to get the run game going, I think this is the game to do it.
So my question for you, what style of running are you thinking? Like, against Florida State, I know in your, I rewatched the game, so you don't have to watch it. You mentioned how BC was running horizontally and it was not a good idea against Florida State. Does Louisville have the same, do you see them having the same kind of athletes that would prevent that? Or do you think they should just stay interior?
I think I think that they don't have exactly the same caliber of athlete as Florida State. I think that they are undersized. They prioritize speed and agility and all that over, size and power. So, maybe don't lean on that super heavily, but I think mixing in all kinds of runs, and that is something that McNulty and Googs have talked about, is like kind of not relying so heavily on one style like Frank Signetti did with just his own runs. Like they use gap, they use zone, they use everything. So I think I think ideally you want to go up the middle because you should theoretically be able to physically overpower the smaller defenders. So a lot of between the tackles runs, ISO, some power, some duo, and then inside zone. And then, maybe then you start kind of using those jet sweeps off of those. Then, you build in some buck sweep stuff, some outside zone stuff. Because I think, again, I think they can have success here. And I think that will really help slow down Louisville's pass rush. It'll open up the rest of the offense, and I think getting those extra tight ends on the field, if they do decide to pass, I think they'll be able to help in pass protection as well.
So do you see the offense actually getting moving? I mean, obviously we're going to get to your picks in a little bit, but do you see the offense actually kind of shedding off some of the yips and the issues that they've had? And
at this point, it's kind of wishful thinking for me, but yes, I think this team, like, their backs are really against the wall. Last week was rock bottom for pretty much the whole team in every phase of the game. So now you got to do something. Like, this is go time for salvaging anything out of the season, because they've got some tough games in the weeks to come. You've got Clemson, you've got Wake Forest. So, if you want to, at least get some momentum going into those games and not just be completely down and, already knowing you're going to get your butt kicked, this is the game to do it. Like Louisville is obviously better than BC from a record standpoint. But I think this is BC's best shot at getting a win for at least a month.
And my last question about the BC offense, and I kind of talked about this offline. One of the most interesting things, and we talked about this earlier this week, was the depth chart adding Jude Bowery behind Jack Conley. Do you think there might be something to that?
I think it was telling that Bowery and also Otto Hess got playing time at the end of the Florida State game. I think similar to how entering the Syracuse game last year when there was talk of MM Moorhead getting playing time, we said that Dennis Grosel would be on a pretty short leash for Moorhead. I think you could see Jack Conley be on a pretty short leash at right tackle as well, because Conley really, he had to come in against Louisville last year, and I believe he played 3 snaps, 2 of which were a sack. The other one was a penalty. So, this was a team that Conley really struggled against last year. I think that if he has some issues early on, I think you could see BC go in a different direction pretty early in the game.
Yeah, it strikes me as that, right? Like, they had to take, I mean, if someone like, no offense, Mitch, but like, you're a writer and you're watching the film and you're seeing this, you got to imagine that Googs, McNulty, and Halfley are watching the same thing and going, okay.
And the thing with, and again, like I've belabored this point ad nauseum, but like, there's really, like, Conley is just struggling in all facets of blocking. Like, he's getting beat with power, he's getting beat with speed, he's getting beat with technique. Like, he just doesn't really have answers at this point. And like, he's got good size. Like, he's a decent athlete in space, not great, but he's fine. He's got good size, and ostensibly should have good strength. But I mean, he just got. I sent you the clip where he just got one arm, long armed, basically right into Djokovic's lap against Florida State. And BC's offensive line gave up 13 pressures as a whole against Florida State. 6 of those were attributed to Conley. That's almost half to one player. That you can't have that.
Right. So you want to be nice to the guy and hope that he develops, but I think you're now 5 games in the season.
And I will say this, I've written about it, but like, the pieces are coming together. Like, Kendall looks like a completely different player than he did in week 1. Really settling in. I know Oz Japilo, I think Jackson Ness, and I can't remember the other one. It was another like part-time player, but they turned in clean sheets, no pressures, no sacks, no nothing. Yeah, no, because Alec had 2. Like, it might have been who's the other? There's another young guy that they played. No, he only had 1 though, and like, even Thomas, like, he's gotten a little bit better. So, I think you're seeing the guys kind of come together a little bit. So I think that, again, like, I think Louisville's defensive scheme presents unique issues for BC's offensive line.
Yep.
But I mean, have been getting better, and again, I still would say there's a lot of problems, but they have been getting better in both pass and run blocking every week.
Right, and it's gone from a complete disaster to just bad.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I mean, you gotta walk before you run. So
Yes, exactly. And then that's kind of like what something I said earlier was like, listen, like that was the thing about the main game is like you just need to get to like a point where you can just stand on your like and just be like, okay, I'm here. This is my job. I can do this. You just need a little bit of confidence to get moving forward. And a lot of the issues that plagued BC against Florida State like kind of were out of the offensive line's hands. It wasn't their best game in terms of giving up pressure, but Jerkovic started he accelerated the clock in his head, got out of the pocket, scrambled sometimes, tried to get the ball out quicker. So, I think things are starting to come together a little bit. Hopefully, again, wishful thinking, but this can be the game where they kind of start really putting these pieces together.
yeah, and that's going to be some drives. So we're going to get into our predictions in just a moment. But if you have not done so already, please make sure you subscribe to Locked On BC, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button right now. All you need to do is hit subscribe. It helps the podcast out a ton, and it helps other BC fans find our podcast. I'm telling you right now, I looked up on YouTube, and I think I just put in Boston College Sports, and it was a BC game recap, something by Boston College Athletics, maybe like a halfway press conference, and then us. So we're getting up there in terms of people finding us, and I'd love for more people to find us. So make sure you hit that subscribe button wherever you get on YouTube. Now we're back, Mitch. Let's get into your predictions, because I think we're gonna have a lot of fans that are not going to agree with you. What does BC have to? You've kind of done your brief overview, but what is like your overall feeling about this game? What you think BC is going to do to possibly win this one?
I think this is essentially desperation time. This is backs against the wall. You're down to your last chip. This is it. Like, this has got to be the last stand. And if they do lose, then that makes the rest of the season really bad. But this is the game that you have to come out and do something. And I'm not even sure like a close loss would be enough. Like, unless the offensive line just played balls to the wall and like some crazy thing happened that Louisville steals the win essentially. Like, I really don't think there's any moral victories you can take away from this game. So they need like a legitimate on the record win. Louisville's favored by 14.5 now. This game, it's moved down 2 points, which is, encouraging for BC. I think in terms of needing to win, like I said, I think BC needs to run the ball. I think Louisville will end up making a lot of mistakes that will, give BC opportunities to, score points, make big plays, and BC just needs to capitalize on those. Like, guys, just it's simple, but they just need to play better than they have the last few weeks. Like, you need to execute your job. You need to not make mistakes. Like, some of the big issues against Florida State was just coverage busts. Like, guys just making mental mistakes. The big pass that Florida State had from like inside their own 10, and then they got all the way down to the other side of the field. Like, that was just, I think Jason Matry just didn't know the coverage and did the wrong thing. And Florida State capitalized with a huge play on that. Like, the BC defense just can't have that. The offensive line, I don't think they're going to play perfect, but if they can just, make another step forward, give Jerkovic some time, get open some holes in the run game. If BC can run the ball, keep the ball out of Louisville's offensive hand, give the defense rest, between drives. Like, you can't be doing like 3 consecutive 3-and-outs. That just cannot happen. And so, ideally running the ball well should, keep the offense on schedule, keep the ball moving downfield, chew the clock. And then, like I said, that'll keep the defense refreshed. And then they'll be able to, I normally you say like tee off on the quarterback, but you kind of want the opposite. You want them slow playing the rush. You want lots of guys in coverage. You want to force Cunningham to make mistakes. Like Matt said from Lou perspective, like Cunningham just still has those, boneheaded decisions that he just, makes randomly in the game. So when he makes those, capitalize on those for turnovers and turn those turnovers into points, whether that be a defensive return or just the offense getting good field position and turning that into a touchdown.
It just seems like BC has not made turnovers in meaningful games
all
year. They had them against Maine, and then one of them was a last second heave into the end zone. But like,
I don't say like the interception turn with Arnold, like they didn't score points on that drive because of a missed field goal. Luckily, it set up Maine in bad field position that the next drive they punted, BC got field position and scored on the next drive. But and then against Rutgers, Elijah Jones has that big interception towards the end of the first half and they don't get any points from it. So like the offense, they just have to execute better. You gotta play better, gotta make better decisions. Do you want me to give my score prediction now or
yes,
give it? Okay.
Go for it. Because we're gonna.
Right.
I have actually before we get off, I'll have you give your predictions. I have predictions. I have 2 questions in the chat that I want to get to.
Okay, so my prediction is BC wins 27-24. Obviously, that's a huge cover. I took BC at plus 400 as the underdog money line here. Like I said, I think this is really a backs against the wall game. They have to win this game. I think that they'll win this game close. I'm not sure if I'm willing to bet on like a last minute field goal to take the lead and defense makes a stand, but I think BC finds a way to get a win out of this game, and that can kind of catapult them into a slightly better back half of the season.
All right, so I am going to disagree with Mitch here, and I am picking BC to lose. And here's why. Mitch kind of talked about the offensive line and their improvements. I see Louisville as a team that brings pressure really well, and I think BC is going to have bigger issues against that. And I do think that they've improved, but I still think they're not going to have enough to win this game. So when I was making my bets for this week, or if I was making a bet, it's a 14.5 point spread. I think BC is going to lose probably by like 10. Mm-hmm. I have them, losing like 24-14 or something like that. I don't think they get boat raced in this game like they did against Florida State, but I don't have them winning this one. But we'll have to wait and see. I still think Halfley has some magic left, and maybe this will be one of those games where he just kind of pulls it out of his team, and we'll see something that we weren't expecting.
Yeah, I mean that's what you're hoping for. I mean, I'm partially kind of trying to manifest a win by believing that it'll happen. Maybe that's naivete or just overconfidence, but you got to start somewhere.
So we'll leave the chat. I mean, the comment section open, as all the Louisville fans will find this and hate Mitch for the next 3 days. But we have 2 comments I want to get to. We'll start with Dan Kent, who I'm putting it up on the screen. Supposed to rain all game. Do you feel this favors either team, Mitch?
I mean, I think that if BC holds true to the key that I have of running the ball, I think that helps. Rain typically favors running the ball. Teams don't want to pass as much, so that's good. That can also lead to more sloppy play. Louisville's already a pretty sloppy team in terms of penalties and turnovers, so rain could exacerbate that. So I mean, it's not like I won't say BC's obviously perfect in the turnovers department. They're very good with penalties. Only I think 4 penalties a game for averaging 28 yards, which is 5th in the nation. So that's pretty good. But BC's obviously had their own issues with turnovers. So I think it does. I think it generally favors the home team, and it favors a team that wants to run the ball more, which obviously Louisville does like to run the ball. But I think that because Louisville's run game is predicated on that outside zone where it's get outside and then cut back, I think that might not be as good in the rain because you're relying on your foot to hold up against that wet ground, whereas BC's a little more downhill power runs, so just get the running back the ball and let him go straight. So I think the rain will favor BC a little bit.
All right. And then our second question, and I'll answer this one, and then Mitch can jump in on the second half. Do you think BC is the worst team in college football? Honest question. So 2 parts to this question. If you're saying worst team in general, absolutely not. No. I mean, have you watched UMass and UConn? They are absolutely atrocious.
Even in the Power 5, Colorado is.
Yeah, worse. I was going to say Colorado is way worse than BC. Mm-hmm. But are they the bottom 5 in Power 5 right now? Probably. Yeah. They're not the worst, but they're down there. So I think it's a fair question, but I don't go with they're the worst team. And he also wanted to say Phil Dracovic went from a 2nd round pick to undrafted in 4 games. Unbelievable. Well, yep. So Mitch, we're going to wrap this up. Where can people find your work?
The Louisville fans who find this can find me at Mitchell T. Wolfe, WOLFE on Twitter. If you say mean things, I might block you. So just, your comments might fall on deaf ears. We'll see.
And for the Louisville fans that don't know the difference between us, I'm AJ Black. I picked you to win. And you can find me at Twitter at AJBlack_BC. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. And Louisville fans, if you're listening to this as well, hit subscribe, and you can do what the Rutgers fans have been doing and leave comments for 4 weeks down the road, because Rutgers fans clearly have nothing better to do. This is AJ Black. I love doing this on YouTube. I have found an audience that I never expected I would find. But we will be back. I will hopefully be on Saturday for a post-game show. We'll talk about that. And then on Monday, we'll have an official post-game show with Mitch. For Mitch Wolfe, this is AJ Black. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you soon. Take care.